And here we go. And share. And here we go. So you guys will remember all of your history. Oh, here we have the Roosevelts, an intimate history. This was from a book, but this was also a PBS thing that really is informative. It's over several times, and I'm sure it will be reprised as everything is. And back in the olden days, people either just hated FDR and thought he was the devil or really liked him. This beautiful woman in the middle, of course, is Eleanor Roosevelt. Back in the day, before you could get your teeth worked on, she was lovely. But it's interesting, your entire life, I was told this by my dentist, your entire life, your teeth move forward, your whole life. So by the time she was midlife, her mouth really caused her problems. But she's young enough here, so her teeth hadn't pushed forward so far. She's lovely. There she is. Look at that. Eleanor. We don't think of Eleanor as a beautiful woman. Okay, here we are. We have Teddy Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt, and FDR, and he's sitting there in his car because that's how he would drive up. They would drive him up in the car, and he could stay sitting, and it looked appropriate. American artists, during the Roosevelt times, what the arts can look like when supported by the government. And this is going to go, you're going to get a lot of like what you think is random information, but indeed, it all, trust me, it'll all go together. The Roosevelts, 1903, he served as president from 1901 to 1909. And there's Teddy with all the kiddies. And we have the oldest daughter in the middle who looks unusually old compared to the other ones. That's because Teddy Roosevelt's first wife died giving birth to that young woman. And they lived in a 3-story house with his mother on one story, his young, beautiful wife on the next story, and then the the living rooms and reception rooms and dining was on the bottom. And his wife began to give birth, and it was not going well. His mother, who lived with him, began to run a temperature, and it was not going well. Teddy Roosevelt came downstairs after his wife died giving birth to find his mother dying the same day as his wife.
Oh,
Almost unimaginable. You lose your mother. Who loves you more? Your wife, your young wife giving birth to your first child, and your mother. So Teddy Roosevelt gave the baby to close relatives, and he just folded his tent and went out west. His family had used the West to build him up because he was a fragile youth and he believed in fresh air. And he went to the West to become a rancher and, ride the purple sage by himself. He just left. Now, these girls are here just to give you an idea of what's at the time. And we look at Roosevelt's daughter, and she's got a Gibson girl look. Charles Dana Gibson. Oh, and that's a big story. That's an art scandal for days. 1867 to 1944. The graphic artist best known for the creation of the Gibson Girl, the beautiful, independent American woman of the 20th century. She really had no rights at all, but they like to pretend that she had some rights. This Gibson Girl is just to give context to the popular looks of the same time period. But what a gorgeous woman. And this is before women bobbed their hair. That was really pretty racy. So their hair was their crowning glory. Here, the strong, determined man protecting the lovely and delicate woman. Look how happy she looks with these young, determined men on either side, carrying their banners for their college. That's a very typical attitude, very typical look. It's great. And there they are in their beautiful lace with their massive hats. Now, during this same time, out west, where Teddy Roosevelt had gone, the story threads together, I swear to you, is Charlie Russell, the artist, 1864 to 1926. And look at that kind of pugnacious look. He was kind of a pugnacious guy. Charlie Russell considered himself the real cowboy, unlike his rival, Frederick Remington, who he called an armchair cowboy. Russell created paintings and illustrations for books and magazines. His work celebrated the outdoor world of the cowboy life and cattle ranching. And TR, Teddy Roosevelt, has by this time become a cattle rancher, determined never to enter the big world again. But late in the 1890s, thousands of cattle died. The Western ranchers were ruined. It was called the Big Die Off. And here we have a picture by Charlie Russell of wolves attacking this horseman. And the horseman has got his six-shooter out, and you can see that little line. He's blasting the number one wolf, while the other ones have turned tail and are running away. It's pretty scary. Now, Waiting for a Chinook, that's the title of this very tiny little piece of artwork that was postage stamp size, and Frederick Russell used it as a postage stamp and mailed it to a pal in the East. A Chinook is a warm wind that would come and melt the snow. A postcard-sized painting by Russell that helped explain to the East Coast buyers why the prices of beef went up. It's like people now that go, oh, why are eggs so expensive? Because the birds had to be killed because of the bird flu. Nobody killed those birds for fun. But this is what was going on. The East Coast buyers said, oh, you guys are ruining us. This weather is part of why Teddy Roosevelt became the president of the United States. Here is a close-up of that little watercolor, and we have the wolves waiting for this poor, starving animal in the snow to just collapse. And here, Teddy Roosevelt went bankrupt and his cattle ranch, as did hundreds and hundreds of the other big ranchers. So he faces the music and he goes back to the East Coast. He picks up his he has worked through a great deal of his grief, and he comes back to the world. And TR, before he became president, now he has to work his way back up into government. He has lots of different small positions and just slowly, 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 slowly works his way back in. TR in Cuba with his Rough Riders. And it's amazing. I mean, that is just such the machismo picture, my God. And but if you look at this, the Teddy Roosevelt designed their uniforms. People, if you were rich, and Roosevelt was still rich, even if he lost the cattle ranch, you could just say, oh, get your buddies, get your people, not conscript people, but ask them to join you, tell them pay them. Basically, these guys are sort of like mercenaries. And you could then volunteer your little army as part of the United States forces. It's amazing. I could have, let's see, sweet lady artists in uniform carrying weapons. It's amazing. According to this famous anecdote, William Randolph Hearst telegrammed to Frederick Remington, and from now on, I'm going to show you Frederick Remington, not Russell. Regarding Cuba was, you furnish the pictures, I will furnish the war. essentially
Oh,
telling Remington to show things in Cuba and find dramatic stories to illustrate, even if there wasn't an active conflict, implying Hearst would create the news through sensational reporting. Hmm, think of Rupert Murdoch. So here this, oh, and I love this picture because they sent in their drawings and artists were sent to the battlefields. Spaniards search women on American steamers. So they have managed to get off all her clothes of this beautiful young woman while they are inspecting her. And that never happened. But it really, in this day and age, with the ladies in the long skirts and no ability to vote, oh, they were outraged when they saw this picture. This picture is just fantasy. But here's Rough Riders, and this is a Frederick Remington India ink wash uh, image that he'd sent up to the newspapers that he was working on. And we see the covered wagon with the mules and the Rough Riders there. They all had their, they traveled light. They had a canteen, they had a rifle, they had a bedroll. And here they are with the gauntlets on their arms coming through in Cuba. And they use here's lots of different, this is a good example of using India ink because you can see this shadow and the splashing over here. It's almost like watercolor, but only in black and gray tones. Then the white, because they used it on like a manila colored paper, the white is white chalk. They could send that image to a newspaper and it could be accurately reproduced. Here's a watercolor. And here's the most famous one, the charge up San Juan Hill with the Rough Riders going. I mean, it's kind of, you look at the guy on the horseback, he's got just a handgun. It was a kind of a crazy time. But in fact, more people died of um, intestinal diseases and um, diarrheal diseases and than were shot. Okay, here we have Roosevelt. Now he's back in the West. He's touring Yosemite. Muir's writing so influenced the public that Teddy Roosevelt made Yosemite America's second national park. And the Buffalo Soldiers rode into the park to protect the land. And here is Teddy Roosevelt. And here is our guy, John Muir, looking very much like the sage he was. Yosemite becomes a national park in 1910. Now, the arts and justice of the same time. Here we have these guys, and we talk about Hearst's newspaper. All these guys were newsboys, and there were in New York, there was Hearst and there was Pulitzer, and they had these big, 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 strong competing newspapers. But there were also newspapers in German, newspapers in Italian, newspapers in Yiddish, newspapers in Chinese. Everybody had a newspaper because there was no television, there was no internet. Not everybody, and radios were not yet around for the regular people. Everybody read like mad. And so they read in different languages, but newspapers were huge. And here are these kind of desperate looking young boys who were delivering news. Um, and they're all bundled up against the cold. And you look at their faces. For young boys nowadays, boys would be smiling. And these guys, they don't have much to smile about. Social justice, here's my guy. I've had a crush on this guy for like at least 20 years. Photography expands to all realms. And this is a picture of Lewis Hine. I wanted to show things that had to be corrected. I wanted to show things that had to be appreciated. Yeah. 1876 to 19, I don't know what, 50. Lewis Hine was went to the gates of factories. He risked his life to photograph the lives of child laborers, and he combined his efforts with Mother Jones. The first court case to protect a child was brought by the SPCA, the same group who protected animals. And it was a 6-year-old girl. And the neighborhood said she is being horribly abused. But legally a man's home was his castle. And that was it. Whatever happened when that front door shut, it was the business of the family. So the neighbors went, "What can we do? She's gonna die." So you can't treat a horse, you can't beat a horse like that. So they called the SPCA. Isn't that amazing? But you look at these kids' faces, and these are young boys. I would say anywhere from 10 to 12. And their faces, particularly the guy on the left with all those little worry lines in his face, you know? I mean, and then the one in the middle, he's just exhausted. These kids are exhausted. And look how bundled up they are. I mean, these guys are breaker boys in the coal mines. When I call a breaker boy, they chunks of coal would come down conveyor belts and they would hammer, 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 breaking it into more reasonable pieces. But sometimes big pieces would come down and break the breaker boys. And here they wanted little kids because the kids could get up in those looms. But if the looms did anything, the kids could also lose a lot of stuff. But Lewis Hine, he was a little guy, and he would say stuff like, "Oh, I think your factory is so wonderful. I love your product. Let me in. I would like to take pictures of what this wonderful company is doing." And then they let him in. So Lewis Hines really did risk his life. And what an unassuming looking guy. He got away with a lot because of his sweet nature, his small stature, and his ability to tell a tale. Composition helped images stand on their own right, aside from the subject. So, this is another part that's really important. In order to get his information across, he had to make a really good photograph, that one that looked at people. So here we have this little girl with these bunches of, and I don't know what she's got. She might have berries, but here we see this sandy area that she's on. And this is whatever she's carrying is heavy, and she's got no shoes. None of the kids ever have any shoes in these pictures, and she's looking at us. So we are arrested by this dark vertical image of the little girl in this white channel that drags you back to that horizon line. So Hein had to have a really good picture as artistically and design wise, along with just his story. Oh, look at that guy's hands. He and his little boy are going through every single bean to make sure it's okay. And see over here on the side, he's got a little pile of rocks. So they're pulling all the rocks and the bad ones out, a bean at a time, because every bean meant a little taste of food. So and look at how there's no meat on this guy, but look at how his hands are. I noticed in a lot of these pictures, people's hands are just enormous because all they did was use their hands. This one is a Lewis Hines that has nothing to do with this. But this one I love. This is the last thing that Lewis Hines did before he died. And I think it's Hine, not Hines. So I beg your pardon. But this one is so beautiful that it was made into a United States commemorative stamp. This is one of the ones that he did at the end of his life that was commemorating the building of the Empire State Building. But we look at this man with this enormous wrench, and then we see the big pipe curving around and the circle behind him. It all just spins your eye right to this guy's face and his clenched jaw. He's clenching his jaw to get as much strength as he can. Ah. Now, there was an awful lot of art. We have the ways that people communicated. They could put artwork in publications, not so much photographs yet, but the photographs were exhibited separately. Here is a poster of a drowning woman cradling an infant by Fred Spear. And this says enlist, of course. This is the sinking of the ocean liner, the Lusitania. It was torpedoed by a German U-boat before World War One. And so, you know, they have women were revered for motherhood and beauty. And so here we have a beautiful woman cradling her infant as she sinks to the bottom of the sea.
Oh,
And that enlistment photograph got people's hearts. And that's all it took. This is World War One. And here, this is a Lusitania, lest we forget the sinking of the Lusitania. And here we have the boats, the capsized lifeboat. Then we have Take Up the Sword of Justice and the Lusitania in the background. And if you look by her skirts, there's hands coming up out of the water. People are drowning. This really spoke to the American public of that time. And here we have a V, get on your bicycle. This is a little later. Back Our Girls Over There, United War Work Campaign. And she's at a switchboard. God, did anybody ever do that? I I I had a job at the
I
switchboard.
did. I was a switchboard operator.
I was a switchboard operator. It didn't go well. Yeah, it didn't go well. I would go, oh dear God. All right. Victor, even back in those days, that was a bit too much technicalities for me. My brain just went, victory bonds, help. And here we have the evil U-boat, and now he's machine gunning them while we have the lifeboat and we have the young sailor with his rescue vest on. He's shaking his fist and he is rescuing a beautiful young woman who clearly is a good person because she works for the Red Cross. I mean, they didn't, I mean, this is wonderful, wonderful imagery. Okay, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he became president in 1933 and is the only person to serve 2+ terms because elections were postponed during World War II. A presidential election was considered too costly and would also divert attention away from the all-consuming war effort. So that was the reason, and it was agreed upon by Congress and the United States. It wasn't just that he wanted a third term. So here we have, just for the heck of it, a picture of him smoking a cigarette with the beautiful Eleanor, and there they are with their 5 kids. And they had those kids, boom, 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 boom. And here we have Eleanor, and we have the Queen Mum over next to FDR and the Prince over there. Ah, time goes by. Now, here is the artwork that's kind of pre-World War II. Here we have all this stuff going on in the big city. And look at these wonderful things. Stripped bare. That's, oh. And then we have, this is the kind of stuff that was in between World War One, World War II. This, I think, I'm going to say this right up. I think that this is by Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock did work that looked like regionalism. And he has some works like this that looked exactly like Thomas Hart Benton. And here we have the big city in between the wars, the 30s. And this is everybody's pretty isolated here. We have the two women talking, but for the most part, nobody's communicating except these two women and a shared newspaper. It's a neat picture. I love the way the car floor zooms backward and then the ceiling zooms back too. It really is pretty wonderful. WPA, that was started by Roosevelt during the Depression, and WPA is Works Progress Administration. While Elon Musk is dancing around with the chainsaw, these guys were finding ways to employ people while we're doing the opposite right now. So this is your history. The WPA murals were installed in libraries, train stations, hospitals, post offices, and often paid tribute to the American work and American workers and America's progress. So what the WPA said was, let's employ artists of all kinds, dancers, actors, puppeteers, muralists, portrait painters, sculptors, builders, designers, architects. So what do we want? We want to decorate that's something that tells our citizens that America is wonderful. They're not just fooling around. And so it was a very purposeful program with purposeful art. Here we have the joy of science on the left. And then we have, I guess this is typesetting. Then we have a printer. And here we have typesetting over here. And then we have a speaker and a guy looking at some plans. I mean, this is all building us. Oh, I got to tell you, I love this. Look at it, it says postmaster. So we know that this is in a post office, and it's Iowa corn, celebrating Iowa corn. And corn is king. And look at the clouds. I love this picture. Well, a long time ago, I was going through Iowa, and there's the Iowa Corn Palace. The entire outside, way up high, is done in giant murals of corn cobs. They got white corn, blue corn, red corn, multicolored corn, yellow corn, corn of every color you could imagine. And they use the whole cob. I think they cut the cobs in half with a saw and then they glue them on. And they're way up high, and they have pictures of Iowa done in full cobs of multicolored corn. It was the best thing I ever saw. And I said, what happens to it? Like the rain and snow comes, and they go, oh, in the fall, the birds come and they just eat it all up. And then the next year, we make a new one. I loved it. And here we have this wonderful tribute to the United States Postal Service, which I believe is now being considered to be privatized. And here we have Native Americans with a bundle of mail on their back, and they're going to deliver that by canoe up in the wilds of Minnesota, I guess. And then we have this guy pulling it to put the mail on a train. And then we have a sailor back here who depends on mail. Then we have the guy putting it in the box. I love this picture. And again, a beautiful picture from a post office. Our main branch has carvings of the history of California in a frieze that with different pictures. Um, that, okay. For that was done during this same time as a WPA project. And here we go with a mural celebrating aviation, locomotion. It's and this engine in the middle. Here we have another one, and I'm not sure where this is. I don't know if this is I don't know if it's a building or whether it's a train station. I have no idea. But here are they all. Oh, we have people going to get ready to play tennis, people planting things. During the Depression, they planted over 6 million trees. Oh, I think maybe more than that, because the Dust Bowl was really a man-made catastrophe. And here, this is neat too. Here we have, this is we can see this is new because this guy's holding a power drill and it's a portable power drill. And he's putting one of these old murals up. And I don't know if it's a print of an old mural, but I love to see people still liking those. And they're unrolling it here. I'm really glad people are still honoring this work. A beautiful picture. Mm. Huh. Now here's one in Detroit. And this is done by Diego Rivera. So these murals were huge and they were all over the United States. Olivera Street has one by, I lost his name. But we have them in our libraries in California. Leo Politi did a lot of them. This is a scene of a
Yeah.
small town. I love the lady in the red coat, the little kid. It's just so serene. Here we have an artist working on a kind of a Art Deco looking sculpture. I mean, they gave jobs to tens of thousands of artists. That's called, starving artist is not a silly expression. This is one of the images of working in the United States. Here's a Grant Wood. I love him with his lollipop trees. It's a regional picture, regionalist. And then, oh, I gotta say, I love WPA posters because they said, okay, let's give these artists a job, but let's make sure their art is helping the nation. So, ready to serve trained efficient workers. Work pays America. Work, and so here they are growing and working. And I love this picture. Here we have the American Eagle as an artist. That's a really classy design. That is just, just the two stars and the little three red tail feathers. I mean, that is just wonderful. And these are all artists' shows because they did art classes for children. Here it is right there. Um, Exhibit, WPA Federal Art Gallery, New Jersey, exhibition of paintings, Federal Art Project. And now we're talking about take away the funding for everything. So this is just history can go in waves. And we need to remember when the governments could be friendly and supportive of art and artists. And I do believe that art is uplifting. We need it. It's not just for fun. And here's pump air, not gas. And then this little baby, tuberculosis, and he's got on his sign on his bib, "Don't kiss me." Your kiss of affection, the germ of infection. Maybe I should send that to RFK. I, jobs for girls and women. And look how happy she is. And look at how, what do you call, how how meager it is. Good pay, good meals. They're going to feed you. And just getting food for a huge amount of Americans was important. And I love this one. This is, I grew up when people said, cut your hair, get a job, shave your beard, get a job. I was amazed when I found that one. Oh, and ladies, okay, this is really amazing. There's a lot for okay, syphilis and gonorrhea. This is kind of pre penicillin, so that is a big deal. But look at our healthy Servicemen. They're healthy and innocent and striding out, and she is the bad one. And all over her pretty red, sexy dress, it says VD. And then I love the kind of double entendre, a booby trap. Isn't that amazing? But you know what? What I did notice with these is who's responsible?
Mm.
It's the ladies. The ladies are the ones responsible. Look at this come hither girl, and look at these nice, innocent servicemen. They're doing good. Oh, protect yourself. Look at her. She's a,
Ooh.
yeah, venereal disease covers the earth. And they always have these ladies with these berets and these red dresses that are very, very snug. And so it's like the men are so innocent, but the women, it's the what you have to watch out for is the women. The price, you'll pay it. God. Okay,
Wow.
I know, I know. The onus for responsibility of venereal disease, according to all of these posters, is solely on the woman, which is interesting. Oh, but this one is good. I like this one. Shame may be fatal. I like that, and it has just anybody. I like that one. Um, this is what you get. Have a good lunch, one hot dish, sandwich, fruit, milk. I mean, they're extolling Americans to be healthy. They're extolling Americans to appreciate the art around them. Indian art right here. And then spare our trees. They're really, all of them have wonderful message. Visit a zoo. And so this also celebrates, there was a whole genre where they hired a cadre of artists by the government to say, well, if you have any money during this hard time, then please go use it in the United States. See our national parks. Again, this is very patriotic. This is very lovely. And the art that came out of those national park posters is just great. This is such the pretty image of Old Faithful with this. Here we got that column, vertical column with the poofs around it of water and steam. And then we have this sky that's cutting across it in the background with wind. That's really a good design. Oh, and here we have this one. What makes this so not static? Because this is a pretty usual view. We've got the Yosemite Falls here, but which is the highest falls in the United States, but it's cut with those sunbeams that come diagonally across that gives the whole picture movement. If you took those sunbeams out, this picture would be lovely, but it would lose so much. Those diagonal columns shooting in front of and behind the trees just is kind of a brilliant addition. Ah, Glacier. Everglades. I had to show that because that's such the great picture with those wonderful water lilies, the contrast of his scales, the great tropical sky with the cumulus clouds bursting up at the end of the day. And I thought, well, God, man, that's some really good art to make me like a crocodile because that's something that I don't ever want to see in person. But that is a great picture. Sequoia, that's a painting. And here's Old Faithful again. That column and the way it's treated by artists can just never, ever get old. Then we have that line again. They used Muir Woods the same way they framed um, oh, the Yosemite Falls. They're framing and bringing you in this channel on the pathway, and then Grand Canyon. I never get tired of these. Rocky Mountains, Joshua Tree, Yellowstone with those colors, Acadia. And here's Bass Harbor, and this is the east, and then North Country with a sugar tapping to collect sap. I gotta say though, the hot dog parks are in the West. I'm pretty prejudiced. Dorothea Lange, and we have looked at her in other things, but I pulled out some other pictures that because they hired Dorothea Lange, Ansel Adams, Gordon Parks, um, Margaret Burkwhite. Those were considered because Stiglitz was the one who really pushed to elevate photography as an art form. So this became an art form and a political form and an information for the public form. And her most famous work, of course, is Migrant Mother. Here she is. I hear you, baby. And there we have that one migrant mother. This one I hope you haven't seen before. I tried to pull pictures you hadn't seen, but he is a very sad guy. And look at this house. I mean, we have to grow right up to the doorstep. And there's his kids. The little girl, that is not a long blanket. That little girl who's looking tired already, that is her tow sack for picking cotton. And
Oh,
they were expected to have that whole damn thing dragged behind them and to fill it. That's not a blanket. I mean, you look at a kid and you think, oh, she's pulling a blanket. No. And here's the mommy. And we look at all these people, and they are very thin people. The diagonal lines here with the slats of this corral bring you right to the lady. Nope, sorry. And this one is in Washington, D.C., and it shows FDR in his sculpture of him in his chair with a really old veteran next to him. So we're working our way up through history, and FDR is still now in the presidency because they canceled that one. He was reelected to a second term and then died halfway through his third term, or even way before the halfway mark. Norman Rockwell's Rosie the Riveter. And that was used as artwork to bring people into a patriotic war effort. And I showed you the gallery so you could see how big it was. And Rosie lived for a long time and was a real person, and she knew Rockwell. We can do it now. This has been attributed to Rockwell in the past. Some people have just assumed it's Rockwell. This is not. It's a guy named Howard Miller, 1943. And it's amazing because poor old Howard, he's not known for anything else, but he produced something that has lasted for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 2010, 20, over 80 years. I mean, it's neat. This is a Rockwell drawing as he's getting ready to make a poster for war bonds. Here's the finished product. Let's give him enough and on time. And here are the four freedoms, and we're getting to the end of art and FDR. And Rockwell was commissioned for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from fear, and one, two, three, it's only four. Three. Religion, fear of speech, freedom of speech, freedom of worship. That's the one that's not showing on here. And here it is, each according to his own conscience. And this one is an important picture that Rockwell did because we have a lady with a rosary. We have a Black American woman up in the left-hand corner. And that is not something that the military was not integrated at that time. And there was an awful lot of, we don't have any integration. But Rockwell put her in. And and that's at a time when that was just plain not done. And Rockwell did it. He had some things that were way ahead of his time. So that's a lovely picture. the right to choose the way you want to believe and what you want to believe. He chose this one for freedom from fear. So, because they had heard all about the Crystal Knock and people being terrorized at night, and then the Blitz, where they bombed at night, it was just horrible. And they thought it would scare the populations and wear them down so much. But here we have the dad. He can sit and read his paper, and upside down it says bombings, the horrors of it all. And so, but his kids are safe at night, freedom from fear. And then, of course, this is the one that we see at Thanksgiving, freedom from want, and then freedom of speech. And this is a real egalitarian one, kind of celebrating a literally blue collar worker. Look at his dirty fingernails. Woo. And people are listening to him respectfully. And I think that's it. Yep. So, this is what art can look like when it is supported, by the powers that be. How do I get out? Oh, I'm not going to get out of there. I just need to stop the share. That's what I. So, it's almost 6. Does anybody have anything to add or say? Please do.
Did you see the wonderful flag upside down?
I was worried about that,
Yes,
I,
yes.
I was worried because he
They
can,
said the ranger who had been fired put it up.
yeah, yeah. Well, I only worry because he'll say, "Oh, that's in California,"
Mhm.
and so we're bright blue, and so that's kind of hard. He doesn't like that, and it makes you go, "Well, I hope that he didn't close Yosemite." You know, I don't know. I mean, I can certainly see the rangers are very ill used throughout the park system, and I say that not because I say that because I know it, because I go up and I volunteer in Yosemite every single summer, and they keep them on temporary assignment so they don't get benefits. Then they let them go, and then they put them back and they let them go. It's hard. It is a hard thing. I know women with master's degrees that slept in the back of their pickup trucks, you know, because of NPS,
Oh,
and so I mean it is and they take advantage of it because all over the United States the people who work in the parks love nature, and they trade on that. These people are naturalists, biologists, botanists, and they and are and geologists, and they live for being outside. So the NPS can really mess around with them. But when you live that close to the edge and then you zip away your job overnight, it's not a good thing. So yeah, but so we have to support, and so we have to support the national parks. And I I I I really, there's a whole genre of national park art that's just so wonderful. Okay, anybody else?
I just want to say that my great uncle was a railroad postmaster, and I got such a kick out of seeing those drawings.
Oh yeah.
I hadn't thought about it in years, but he used to tell us stories when we were little.
You
Thank you.
know, it's
This was
amazing.
great.
And because, the railroad art was the same thing. Those, go on the Southern Chief. And they just were wonderful. And they showed amazing pictures of the West, particularly, because they wanted tourists. And they would go on the Southern Pacific and all these great trains. And my family, I had some family in the East and some family in the West, and the family in the East during the 20s would come back and forth by train, and they loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. He wore a
Jody,
a
I was
uniform and
really,
one of those little
oops, sorry.
hats. Oh, I'm sorry, Adria. I
I'm
was just
sorry.
saying he wore a uniform and one of those you know, stiff round hats with the bills, just right out of a cartoon.
They still, that's a really important hat, that round ranger hat that is NPS the whole way. Yeah, my son was an interpretive ranger at Alabama's Booker T. Washington and the airfield for the black pilots. What was it? Come on. Tuskegee. He was an interpretive ranger at the Tuskegee, so he would walk around and tell people stuff, and he always wore that round hat. Okay, next person.
Oh, I was gonna say the picture that you showed, was a photograph of the young man bent over with the wrench. And it had the machinery, you know, how much that looked like the murals of the day. That Diego Rivera did. It just had that the shapes and everything.
I know.
The shadows.
That's a really good thing because they had a lot of this stuff that purposely things were swirling inward, you know, in photographs, in paintings, in a lot of ways. They had just a good way of pulling you into the middle.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. You guys are 6. Anybody else want to say anything?
Good pictures, thanks.
So next week, we're actually going to have a few men artists. But I'm gonna say, I can't help it. It's like a little red flag in front of me when you know, the ladies are being just pushed away. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you. This was
Thank
really
See you
fun.
next week.
All right,
Thank
see you
you,
next week.
Jody.
Thank you. Bye, Jody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Jody.
Bye-bye,
you.
thanks.
Oh, Anne, I'm glad you're here. Oh, Anne, did you hear how much money we raised?
Oh, how wonderful.
Did you? Okay, Anne, let me give you the total. Wait a minute, where is it? We are now standing at Fire Victims Help, $2,441.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Isn't that dandy?
Yes.
Yes, terrific.
And I wanted to let you know that Karen and I worked for an hour before the class started, and she's registered.
Oh,
So she's in.
Anne helped me tremendously.
oh, it's not easy. The college makes it not easy.
It's
No.
not
So
easy.
much. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
see you later.
Jody.
You haven't
Bye.
heard anything from Yosemite, have you?
Have I heard anything?
Yeah.
No, except this, we rented a cabin, my family and I rented a cabin up near Wawona for the middle of March.
Mhm.
It'll be our Easter week, so spring break. So we won't miss any classes. But the guy who it's a VRBO, he owns a house up there. It's in the national park, but he owns a house, one of the few people.
Right.
And so he called my daughter and said, I don't know if Yosemite's going to be open.
Yep.
So
Oh, that's hard.
we have no
So we
idea.
may not hear anything for a long time.
No. Well, the way stuff is working, you know, it.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll just have to, Karen and I just have to take a trip up and say hi.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna walk in, you know. I mean,
No, a trip up to Santa Barbara and say hi.
oh, good. Do.
Could I say one thing?
Yes.
My mother was good friends. Do you know the name Sam Hyde Harris? Because he did railroad. Does
Oh,
that?
I love those things. I have them somewhere in one of the art things. Maybe American Southwest. I don't know. I have done them, but they're just, you can go online and look. Just go online and in your search bar write railroad posters the way.
Okay.
And then when it tells you information at the top, smack images. And that
Okay.
will show you the pictures.
Can't get
Okay.
out of
Okay, guys, I love all of you.
Enjoy.
Thanks, Jody.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.